Most people say it is not a good decision to marry single mothers, but I thought all those sayings were mere exaggerations. Welcome to Anonymous Stories. If you are new here and love listening to gripping stories, support us by clicking on the subscribe button to unlock amazing stories daily. My name is Ethan. This is everything that happened to me. I built my house with my own hands, not in the literal sense, but in the way a man builds something from the ground up. Every brick, every beam, every polished tile was paid for with the sweat of my ambition. I came from nothing. No silver spoon, no family name to open doors, no safety net to catch me if I fell. What I had was an unforgiving world and a mind too stubborn to accept failure. Growing up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment with a father who worked himself to the bone and a mother who left before I was old enough to understand why, I promised myself one thing. I would build a home so strong, so filled with love, that no one inside would ever feel alone again. And for a while, I thought I had. When I met Olivia, I saw more than just a beautiful woman. I saw warmth, resilience, and a kind of loneliness that mirrored my own. A single mother, raising two teenagers on her own, struggling to make ends meet but refusing to let the weight of life crush her. She was everything I had been searching for. A reason to come home at night, a family to fill the empty spaces of my life. I wanted to be her protector, her provider, the man who erased her struggles and gave her the life she deserved. And I did. I married her. I moved her and her kids into the house I had spent years planning, the house that was supposed to be the foundation of our future, a 5-bedroom sanctuary in an upscale neighborhood with a sprawling backyard, a kitchen big enough for family dinners, and a fireplace that I imagined us gathering around during the holidays. But a house is just walls and a roof. It is the people inside who make it a home. And slowly, I began to realize that I was not one of those people. At first, it was easy to ignore the small things. The way Ryan, her 17-year-old son, barely acknowledged me when he walked through the door. The way Emily, her 15-year-old daughter, scrolled through her phone at the dinner table, uninterested in anything I had to say. Even the way Olivia, my wife, seemed to carry an invisible barrier between us, as though I was more of a necessary convenience than a man she truly loved. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Blending a family wasn't easy. They would come around. They had to. So I kept trying. I took Ryan to car dealerships, hoping to bond over his love of fast cars, but he barely muttered more than a few words before texting his friends to pick him up. I surprised Emily with a shopping spree, trying to be the cool stepdad, only for her to max out my credit card without so much as a thank you. And Olivia, well, Olivia took what I gave without question. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, jewelry she barely wore. I was trying to buy something that couldn't be bought. Respect, love, a place in this family. Then, the cracks deepened. One evening, I came home late from work, exhausted but eager to sit down with them, to feel like I belonged. Instead, I walked into a living room filled with laughter that died the second they saw me. I heard my name. I heard the way Ryan scoffed, the way Emily giggled. And then Olivia, my wife, my supposed partner, whispered something that sent another wave of laughter through the room. I wanted to ask what was so funny. I wanted to demand to know what joke I had unknowingly become the punchline of. But I already knew. I was the fool, the man who paid for everything, who funded their lives while remaining an outsider in his own home. I stood there, watching them, a painful truth settling into my bones like winter frost. I had built this house for them, but I was the stranger living in it. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I may have built this house, but I could tear it down just as easily. Love has a price. I always knew that. It demands time, patience, sacrifice. But what I hadn't realized was that, for some, love was nothing more than a transaction. And in this house, the one I built with my own hands and my own hard-earned money, I was the only one paying. It started with small things, the kind of moments that are easy to brush aside when you don't want to see the truth. Ryan had always been distant, But now he was openly dismissive. He barely acknowledged me unless he needed something. My name wasn't spoken with respect or familiarity. It was an afterthought, a grunted syllable thrown over his shoulder as he walked past me. And when I wasn't around, I wasn't even an afterthought. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw my car, the one I worked years to afford, was missing. My first thought was that Olivia had taken it. But no, when I stepped inside, I found her curled up on the couch, wine glass in hand, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. "Where's my car?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She barely looked up. "Ryan took it." Ryan, her 17-year-old son. No license. No permission. My car. I clenched my jaw. "And you just let him?" Olivia sighed, finally looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "He said he'd be back soon. Don't make a big deal out of it." A big deal. It wasn't about the car. It was about respect, about the fact that Ryan didn't even bother to ask, that Olivia didn't see the problem, that I was being treated like a piece of furniture, something useful but unimportant. But I let it go. I let it go because I didn't want to be the man who counted every slight, who kept track of every bruise to his pride. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was just part of being a stepfather, that they needed time to adjust. But time only made it worse. Emily, Olivia's 15-year-old daughter, took my kindness and spun it into expectation. My credit card was her playground. At first, it was small, a few online orders here and there, a new outfit, a manicure. I didn't mind. I wanted her to have nice things. But then it escalated. Expensive shopping sprees. Luxury brands. She walked through the house in designer clothes, her nails painted in colors I had unknowingly paid for, her phone always buzzing with friends she was too busy with to acknowledge me. One day, I opened my credit card statement and nearly dropped the envelope. $3,000. I confronted Olivia. "Do you see this?" I held up the bill, shaking it slightly. Emily spent $3,000 in 1 month. Olivia barely blinked. She's a teenage girl. It's normal. Normal. Something inside me snapped, but I held it in. Because what was the alternative? Fight with my wife? Demand she put boundaries on a daughter who clearly had none? I already knew how that would end. With me as the villain, the strict stepfather ruining their perfect, comfortable lives. So I swallowed my anger. I paid the bill, and I told myself that love, real love, meant sacrifice. But the hardest part wasn't Ryan's disrespect. It wasn't Emily's entitlement. It was Olivia. She had changed in ways I couldn't ignore. At first, it was subtle. The way she turned away from me in bed, how her kisses became brief, almost obligatory, how she stopped asking about my day, stopped looking at me the way she once did. I tried to tell myself that relationships ebb and flow, that maybe she was just stressed. But deep down, I knew better. She was comfortable. Too comfortable. She didn't have to try anymore, because in her mind, I wasn't a husband. I was an ATM with a wedding ring. And then came the night that finally broke me. I had stayed late at work, drowning myself in projects, finding excuses not to go home to the house that no longer felt like mine. When I finally walked through the front door, I heard them before I saw them. Laughter. Not the warm, inviting kind. The cruel, biting kind. The kind that makes your stomach turn before you even know why. I followed the sound to the living room. Ryan, Emily, and Olivia were sitting together on the couch, drinks in hand, eyes bright with amusement. They hadn't noticed me yet. And then I heard it. "I swear, he doesn't even realize," Ryan was saying, shaking his head. "He just pays for everything and keeps his mouth shut," Emily added, giggling. And then Olivia, the woman I had given everything to, the woman I had built this life for, leaned back against the couch with a smirk. "That's what makes it so easy," she said. "He actually thinks this is his family." They burst into laughter. My heart stopped. For a moment, I just stood there, gripping the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. The world tilted. My vision tunneling as the weight of those words settled over me. He actually thinks this is his family. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was nothing to them. I was a paycheck, a convenience, a fool. I could have walked in right then. I could have confronted them, demanded an explanation, asked Olivia how she could say those words about the man who gave her everything. But I didn't. I backed away, quietly, stepping into the shadows before they saw me. Because in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg for their respect. I would show them the cost of their betrayal. And when I was done, they would never laugh at me again. Denial is a slow poison. It seeps into your veins, numbing the pain just enough to keep you from acting. Just enough to make you believe that if you wait long enough, things will change. I told myself that. I told myself that Olivia didn't mean it, that Ryan and Emily were just kids who didn't understand the weight of their words, that I was overreacting. Because if I let myself believe the truth, that the woman I loved never truly loved me, that the family I built was never really mine, then what did that make me? A fool. And I wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. So I tried. I clung to the shreds of hope, convincing myself that maybe if I spoke to Olivia, if I made her see what she was doing to me, to us, things would change. The next morning, I sat across from her at the kitchen island, the scent of coffee filling the silence between us. She scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I cleared my throat. We need to talk. She didn't look up. About what? I hesitated. I wasn't even sure where to start. The credit card bills? The disrespect? The cruel laughter echoing in my head from the night before? I chose my words carefully. I feel like I'm just a paycheck to you and the kids. That got her attention. Olivia finally set her phone down, arching an eyebrow at me. Where is this coming from? I swallowed hard. I heard you. Last night. I heard what you said. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked annoyed. Ethan, you're taking things out of context. Context? I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, really? What exactly was the context of you saying I'm not really part of this family? She sighed, rubbing her temples. You're being dramatic. That word, dramatic, was a knife in my ribs. I heard you laughing at me, Olivia. I heard Ryan and Emily talking about me like I'm some joke. My voice was steady, but inside, I was unraveling. And you sat there and agreed with them. Olivia leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. You're making this into something it's not. I felt my grip on the counter tighten. Then tell me what it is. Her silence told me everything. I stared at her, waiting, hoping, begging for something. Remorse, an apology, a flicker of guilt. But there was nothing. Finally, she sighed, shaking her head. Ethan, you knew what you were getting into. I had 2 kids, a life before you. You came into this house and chose to provide for us. No one forced you. I almost laughed. That was how she saw it. Like I had volunteered to be used. I chose to be a husband, a stepfather, not a bank. She rolled her eyes. You're overreacting. That was it. That was the moment. The second the last thread inside me snapped. I had spent years building a life for these people. I had sacrificed, worked late nights, pushed through exhaustion just to make sure they never needed anything. And here I was, trying to reason with the woman who had taken it all for granted. I stood up so quickly that the chair scraped against the tile. I'm done talking. I walked out, ignoring the sound of her calling my name. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the framed blueprint of this house. The house I had designed, every wall, every detail, planned with care. It was supposed to be a home. Instead, it was a prison. The laughter from the night before echoed in my head. Their words replayed over and over like a broken record. He actually thinks this is his family. My hands curled into fists. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the email notification flashing across my screen. A bank alert. My heart stopped as I clicked on it. A transfer. from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. The amount wasn't huge, not enough to send alarms ringing. But it wasn't the first time. I scrolled back through past transactions, my pulse pounding in my ears. One transfer, then another, then another. A pattern. She had been doing this for months. Slowly, quietly, moving money into an account I had never seen before. Preparing. I leaned back in my chair, my breathing shallow. She had been planning a future without me. Everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed. She had been securing her way out, piece by piece, all while smiling in my face. A cold, bitter rage settled into my chest. I had been holding on to hope that this was salvageable. That maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. But there was no fixing this. Not anymore. I wasn't her husband. I wasn't their family. I was nothing more than the fool who pays for everything. Not for long. As I sat there in the house I built, the walls that once felt like protection now closing in like a cage, I realized something. They thought they had me figured out. They thought I would keep giving, keep sacrificing. They thought I would stay. They were wrong. This was the breaking point. And when I walked away, I wouldn't just leave. I would take everything with me. There's a certain power in silence, in patience, in watching the ones who wronged you continue their charade, completely unaware that the ground beneath them is crumbling. I didn't lash out. I didn't scream. I didn't demand explanations or throw accusations. No, that would have been too easy for them. They would have twisted my anger, made me the villain, turned the tables until I was the one apologizing. Instead, I smiled. I kissed Olivia on the cheek before heading to work. I handed Ryan the car keys when he asked, no, demanded, them. I nodded when Emily pouted about needing another shopping spree. I let them believe they had one. But behind closed doors, the game had already begun. Step 1. Securing my assets. I met with my lawyer, David, the next morning. He had been with me since the early days, back when my business was nothing more than a dream and a pile of unpaid bills. He had seen me build my empire from the ground up, and now he would help me protect it. You sure about this? David asked, scanning the documents I had laid before him. This is the kind of thing you don't come back from, Ethan. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. They never saw me as family, David. Just a paycheck. And I'm done paying. A slow smirk pulled at his lips. All right then, let's burn it down. We started with the house. On paper, it had been bought under our names, Olivia and I, together. But thanks to the prenuptial agreement she had so willingly signed, assuming, of course, that it would never come back to haunt her, the majority of assets remained under my control. With a few legal maneuvers, I transferred full ownership of the house back to myself. The cars? I'm just waiting for the right moment. I walked upstairs before they could see me, my heart pounding. Not in sadness, not in anger, but in cold, calculated satisfaction. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea that their moment was coming sooner than they thought. Step 3. The waiting game. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Olivia and the kids continued their lavish lifestyle, completely oblivious to the storm creeping toward them. Ryan bragged to his friends about his car, my car. Emily planned another shopping spree, assuming her credit card would still work. Olivia met with her friends for expensive lunches, laughing over overpriced cocktails. All the while, I tightened the noose. I spoke with my financial advisors, ensuring everything was locked down. I met with a realtor, preparing to sell the house, my house, the moment the time was right. I finalized the divorce papers, ensuring every detail was set. And then, I waited. I waited for the moment when they would finally realize the truth. That their easy, comfortable life had been nothing but an illusion. That the man they had dismissed, mocked, and used had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. That everything they thought they owned, everything they had taken for granted, was never really theirs to begin with. The game had begun, and I was about to make my move. There's a certain satisfaction in silence, the kind that follows a carefully laid plan finally snapping into place. That morning, As I sat in my car outside the house I had built, I wasn't filled with regret. No second thoughts. No guilt. Only a quiet, unshakable certainty. I had one. Inside, Olivia and her kids were about to wake up to a reality they never saw coming. It started with the credit cards. Olivia's usual morning routine involved scrolling through her phone while sipping her expensive coffee, checking her bank balance, transferring money into the secret account she thought I didn't know about. Except today, her account was empty. The funds she had been siphoning were gone, legally reabsorbed into my accounts. Her platinum credit card? Declined. Ryan and Emily's cards? Frozen. Confused, she probably tried again, only to be met with the same result. I imagined the growing panic in her chest, the dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. Downstairs, Ryan would be pulling on his sneakers, keys in hand, ready to take my car for another joyride. Except my car wasn't there. Because it wasn't his car. It had been towed an hour ago, repossessed along with the second car Olivia loved to drive. Emily would be getting ready for a day out with her friends, confident that her limitless spending would continue. She'd try to pay for her overpriced brunch, only for her card to decline in front of everyone. Confusion would turn to frustration, then panic, then rage, and I wanted to see it. I stepped inside, greeted by the chaos I had orchestrated. "Ethan," Olivia barked, storming toward me. She held up her phone like it was a weapon, the screen flashing a message she clearly didn't understand. What the hell is going on? I took my time, setting my keys down, looking around the house that, until this morning, she had taken for granted. The expensive furniture, the paintings she picked out, the designer bags scattered across the couch. None of it belonged to her anymore. "I don't know, Olivia," I said, leaning against the counter. "Why don't you tell me?" She narrowed her eyes. "My bank account is empty. My credit cards aren't working. Ryan's car is gone." Ryan came stomping into the room, his face red with fury. "Where the hell is my car?" I let out a short laugh. "Your car?" I repeated. "I don't remember signing it over to you." He clenched his fists, ready to argue, but Olivia cut in. "Ethan, if you did something, I did something?" I echoed, tilting my head. "Like what?" "Like realizing that I've spent the last few years as nothing more than a walking bank account? Like realizing that I let myself be disrespected in my own home?" Olivia blinked, thrown off by my tone. I had never spoken to her like this before. I had never spoken to any of them like this before. Emily stomped down the stairs, her phone clutched in her hand. "Why is my card declined?" she whined. "I was trying to, let me guess," I cut in. "Trying to buy something you didn't earn? Something on my dime?" Emily flinched. Ryan scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're overreacting." "Am I?" I asked, reaching into my pocket. "Because I don't think I am." And then I pulled out the final nail in the coffin. An envelope. I handed it to Olivia, watching as she ripped it open, her hands shaking. As her eyes scanned the words, her face drained of color. "Divorce papers," I said, my voice steady. "Effective immediately." For the first time since I had met her, Olivia was speechless. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She looked up at me, her breathing uneven. "You're not serious." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "This is a joke," Ryan muttered, shaking his head. "Right?" He wouldn't. "Oh, shut up, Ryan." Olivia snapped, panic seeping into her voice. "Ethan, listen to me. We can talk about this. We can talk?" I let out a sharp laugh. "Like how you talked about me behind my back. Like how you and your kids mocked me in my own house." Her face twisted. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I pulled out my phone, and I hit play. Her voice filled the room. "Men like him? They want to be used. They feel important that way. I don't know how he doesn't see it. I'm just waiting for the right moment." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. I watched as realization dawned on Olivia, her lips parting in horror, as Ryan and Emily's faces paled, as the weight of their own words came crashing down on them. "You," Olivia whispered, voice cracking. "You recorded me?" I shrugged. "You handed me the knife, Olivia. I just decided when to use it." Her anger crumbled, replaced with something more desperate. "Ethan," she stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "You don't have to do this. We can fix this." "No, you don't have to do this, Mom," Emily cut in, eyes wide. "Tell him you're sorry. Tell him whatever he wants to hear." Ryan scoffed. "Oh, please. You think he's going to fall for that?" He turned to me, his lips curling into a sneer. "Fine. Take the house. Take the money. You were just a bitter old man trying to buy a family anyway." I smiled. "You're right. I did try to buy a family." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "But I'm not buying anymore." Ryan glared at me, but Olivia grabbed his arm, shaking her head. She knew. She knew it was over. And that's when the final blow came. "You have 3 days to leave," I said simply. Olivia gasped. "What?" "I gave you everything," I continued. "But now, you're just strangers living in my house." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, no," I held up a hand. "I was never your husband, never their father, just the fool who paid for everything." I turned toward the door, grabbing my keys. "But not anymore." And with that, I walked out. I didn't look back, because the reckoning was complete. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, watching them leave. Olivia, once so poised and confident, now looked small beneath the weight of her own mistakes. Her hands trembled as she clutched the last of their belongings, just a couple of suitcases stuffed hastily with whatever they could carry. The rest? It stayed here, because it was never theirs to begin with. Ryan and Emily refused to look at me. Ryan's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Emily's face was streaked with silent tears, not of remorse, but of disbelief. Disbelief that their world had crumbled in a single morning. The car they left in wasn't one of the luxury SUVs they had grown accustomed to. Those were gone. Instead, Olivia's sister had come to pick them up, her expression a mix of confusion and barely concealed judgment. She didn't understand how Olivia had let this happen. Neither did Olivia. For the first time in our marriage, she had no control, no power to manipulate, no leverage, nothing. I watched as she hesitated before stepping into the car, her fingers tightening around the door handle. For a brief moment, she turned to look at me, her lips parting, as if searching for one last plea, one final argument to change my mind. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I simply stared back, silent and unmoving. And when she realized there was nothing left to say, she got in. The car pulled away. And just like that, they were gone. I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me, something I had been carrying for years but never truly acknowledged. I was free. For the first time in a long time, the house was quiet, peaceful. No sharp words cutting through the air. No dismissive glances. No laughter at my expense when they thought I wasn't listening. I stepped inside and let the silence settle around me. The house looked the same, but it felt different. No longer a cage. No longer a stage for a performance where I played the fool. This was my home, and I had reclaimed it. I walked through each room slowly, memories flashing in my mind like ghosts lingering in the corners. Here was the dining table where Olivia once smiled at me like I was her whole world. It had been a lie. Here was the living room where Ryan would lounge on the couch, feet propped up, treating my generosity like an expectation rather than a gift. Here was Emily's bedroom, still cluttered with expensive clothes and bags, things she had never even worn, things she had purchased just because she could. I had built this house for them, for us. But in the end, I had only built it for strangers. Strangers who had used my love, my trust, my desire for a family, and twisted it into a transaction. And I had let them, but no more. As I stood in the center of the house, I felt something shift again. Only this time, it wasn't weight. It was lightness. I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I wasn't angry. Not even at Olivia. Because at the end of the day, I had let myself believe in an illusion. I had wanted so badly to be part of a family that I ignored the signs. I had been blind. But now, my eyes were open. I walked to the front door and looked out one last time. The car carrying them had long disappeared down the street, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of regret. With a deep breath, I stepped back inside, and I closed the door. On them, on my past, on the fool I had once been. Because today wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A new chapter, one where I was no longer the man who paid for everything. I was simply a man who had finally learned his worth. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay tuned for more stories that keep you hooked till the very end. See you soon.